now I have the pleasure of introducing you to Chris Brogan. Chris is an author. He's an executive coach. He's an executive advisor. He does so many things, and he's an author of more books than you could possibly imagine. And I think officially it's 10, but you look at the list and it's like 25. I don't know. And he has another book that's coming, and what I think is really special about Chris is that he's so real. He writes from his heart. He interacts from his heart, and he's the most one of the most authentic public figures I think I could ever imagine meeting. He One of the titles of his books is "It's Not About the Tights." Which is really funny. Superheroes. He brings to business, a lot of humor and again, being real. And so for that, we're really grateful. And so his last gig, he was a strategic partner and chief of staff in a really more advisor to the CEO. And he helped to grow a company from 10 million to almost 300 million. And almost 900 people. So he's a New York Times bestselling author, a global keynote speaker. He's one of the first bloggers ever, and so he's all about
Progress.
um, changing the game and making sure that things are staying fresh. So with that, Chris, I'm turning it over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so very much for having me. I'm very happy to connect with everybody. Christy and I have known each other on and off for 10 or 15 years or so, and it's sort of like a waveform, like sometimes I'll get a message here or there, or sometimes she'll come in, she'll ask a question. And she said, "Hey, I do this thing where on Fridays we get together and we get coffee." And that's the last thing I heard out of her mouth. Because like, I like coffee. This is very expensive. I don't know if you have this where you are, but it's this very expensive company that sells coffee for with my app, by the way, $1.30. And as I'm a senior citizen, technically according to AARP, this bitch is delightful. So yeah, I don't mean to cuss. I don't usually cuss. That's not me. That's that other guy. Listen, I'm really happy to connect. I asked Christy what I should put together, and she was like, "I don't know. You kind of cover a gamut of things." I don't ever like to start with a biography because it's not like movies start like that. Star Wars starts with like lasers and stuff. It does not start with, "Hey, you're going to meet this idiot farmer." Like it would be a super boring movie if it started the way people start their speeches. But let me do my best and tell you just a tiny bit of why I hope I can be useful to you. I have had a variety of careers because I'm a man of a certain age. I have white whiskers. I can say this. I worked, my very first big grown up job was at the telephone company back when you could say the telephone company in the United States. And I have worked for wireless telecom and that sort of a thing. In 2006, I was pulled away to run a conference on the future of voice and video on the net. And I thought that was pretty fun for a minute. And then a year into that, my CEO at the time, I was a sort of thought partner to the chairman, but I also reported to the CEO. First thing you know when you're joining a company is if you have two dads, it's not going to go well. So I learned that at this role because dad number one thought I was awesome, and dad number two thought, "I don't know how this guy is supposedly making us money because I'm not richer than I was before I met him." So I did that for a little while. Somewhere after that, I made my own company because I got kind of tired of not being picked. And instead of being picked last in gym class, if you start your own gym class, you are instantly number one on the list. So I started my own company. I started going out and doing things. I was blogging way back in the old days when they were calling it journaling, and that led me to a book deal. I had wanted to be an author since I was a little kid. And when the time came that I got the first offer for a book deal, I almost turned it down because I was like, you know what, blogging is so much easier than writing a mainstream book these days. Like you just go to your WordPress and you type it in, you hit publish, and you're done. You've done the job. And writing a book I thought might be trickier. But I took the book deal, and then I asked the person who gave it to me, I said, "Hey, can I like write this with a co-author? I've got a friend I was just going to call up, see if he wanted to write a book too. And they said, yeah, I guess so. You don't get any more money. I said, cool, I'll split mine with him. And so next thing you know, I call my buddy Julian. I say, hey, you want to write a book? He was like, okay. And so we just split the difference in writing. Like I wrote half the book, he wrote half the book. And then I was so fussy that I didn't like his writing style that I rewrote most of his part too. He was super smart. He just didn't write the way I would write. And I thought I would be smarter by helping by rewriting his part. Years later, we wrote a second book and I didn't touch his part because I found out I liked his writing style better than mine. So that first book was called Trust Agents, and it was about using the web to earn trust, build reputation, and that sort of a thing. And it hit in 2009. It hit exactly as the financial crisis hit. So that was when Bill wasn't in Christie's program. But the reason trust agents worked so well was because people were going through a crisis of trust in the financial industry. And up until that point, the kinds of people I got to blurb the book were Fritz Henderson, the chairman of General Motors, and those kinds of people who I happened to meet one day because of being an idiot blogger. Flash forward to I get a New York Times bestseller list for this book, and it was our first ever book. So I called Julian and I said, "Hey, they just told me we're on the New York Times bestseller list." He goes, "Oh." I said, "Yeah." I said, "Do you feel any different?" He goes, "No." I said, "Yeah, me neither." And that was it. I'd wanted to be a writer my whole life. I just hit the biggest writing award you could get short of a Pulitzer, and I was like, eh. And however, what I learned is this: so books. David Maister, who co-wrote The Trusted Advisor, said the book is the best $25 business card you can't buy. The other thing you learn is that books make you about $1.25 a book. In fact, I, as an Amazon affiliate, make more money referring my books than I do selling my actual book. But the speeches work, and I got a lot of loot speaking because I would get professional speaking gigs and I would get consulting. And when I launched my first consulting business, this is how absolutely dumb I was. I put up a website and I said, we work with Fortune 100 companies. What I meant was that's who I would prefer to work with. And so Sony called up and said, hey, we're a Fortune 100 company. And we said, oh, cool. And so we did work with Sony Electronics USA. Microsoft called, Google called. I had that logo slide that companies just salivate over by mistake. And my first non-Fortune 100 company was Maxine Clark, who was the chief bear at Build-A-Bear back in the day. She founded the Build-A-Bear company. And she met me backstage at a speech I gave at Disney and said, well, I'm not a Fortune 100, but I'm Fortune 500. Would you consider working with me? And I was like, okay. Again, still no reason why any of these people should have said yes to me. I want to tell you all those things not to brag, because one thing you'll start to catch on, and Christy alluded to this, I don't sell myself especially well. Most of my stories put myself down, which is more fun for me. But I wanted to start with the highlights, one, so that you'd sit in and listen, and two, because I learned a bunch of this stuff by absolute mistake. And the reason I want you to know that is that anyone could do this sort of thing. Because if a guy as dopey as me, who literally didn't know that when I wrote "We Serve Fortune 100," that what people were perceiving was that I meant like that's who my clients were. I manifested it like one of those Rhonda Burn the Secret kind of things, and accidentally had a huge roster of Fortune 100 people. So since then, the world has changed dramatically. In 2007 or so, in 2006 and into 2009, I was saying, you really got to blog. Blogging is cool. Then in 2005, I started my first podcast called Fat Guy Gets Fit. And the reason it was called Fat Guy Gets Fit is if I never got fit, I could do this podcast in perpetuity. So I thought I'd come up with the best subject for a podcast ever. Back when we did this, I co-founded an event called Pod Camp, which we made a global event because we didn't want to run it ourselves. We made it an unconference and said, here's the rules to make the event. And people showed up. So I was early to podcasting, not the first year, but the second year. I had my first YouTube account in 2005, which is when they launched YouTube and when Google bought it. I have since been on all of the social media platforms. I was user 10,202 on Twitter. until someday I finally decided I was done being on all those platforms. So I never had a Snapchat account. It didn't make sense to me. I still don't know how to do a single TikTok dance, but not because I've decided I'm a grumpy old man, but because one, I absolutely can't dance. I look like someone pushed the refrigerator off the back of a truck. But also because I realized that the kind of people I was hoping to earn their attention, I could probably limit myself to a few places. So my networks to communicate with people of choice are LinkedIn. Like I've seen this sidebar fill with people's very long bios. LinkedIn. I have YouTube. I have a couple different accounts on YouTube, and then I run a newsletter or two. So I'll show you how to get to that later if you find any of this talk interesting, even in the least bit. But in so doing, what I learned all along the way, and what has come more true now in ye old land of AI, what is now more true is that people were told for some amount of time, you should make content. And what people said back to that was, okay, I'll make content. And so many people came kicking and screaming into doing it. And it always felt and looked like someone was forcing you to turn in homework. And so you wouldn't talk to people like you talk to a human. You talk in this sort of stinted, sculpted language that you would talk to, your school teacher or your professor. And you'd write these documents that sort of seemed like, the absolute ideal planet. And you'd say, I don't know, I'm doing that content that people told me to do, and no one's paying any attention. Wow. It's a magical thing that never really worked out for a lot of people because it turned out they looked like someone had a gun to their head. And if they would do YouTube, it was worse because they'd be on screen. And so look how making so much eye contact with you. The average YouTube person who is forced onto YouTube looks like this. Hi, I'm Chris Brogan, and you probably can't tell that I'm reading right now because I'm so good at presenting to you. It's the worst. And they're like, well, they told me to get on YouTube, so I did. And it's like the difference between shooting a bullet and throwing a bullet. Like it's just not the same experience, right? So that's how things have turned out. But let's make it worse. Enter our friend artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence has now set us up for this other great opportunity. You can ask a very cordial robot, would you please write an article for me? And the robot says, sure, I will. And it'll spit out, I have to tell you a little tech detail about this, but it'll spit out a document that looks like a human might have written it if that human were, in a lab somewhere. What AI does, the way AI writes, is it writes predictive sentences. So it writes based on the concept that it knows what it's going to say next, which is, humans do. But if a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush is something you've heard 10 billion times. It's all platitudes all the time with AI. So for instance, if I say something like, give a man a fish, your head just repeated like you finished the whole phrase, right? So I would say to people on my stages when I give a speech, give a man a fish and he has smelly hands. Teach a man to fish and you can become an internet content creator. And people are like, what? Because that's not how humans talk. But what did I do? I interrupted your pattern. I interrupted the way your brain was waiting to catch that info. That is the opposite of what AI technology does. So, what AI technology is currently, and it will get better, what it is currently amazing at doing is writing absolute garbage that no one wants to read. LinkedIn says over 54% of the content on LinkedIn now is generated largely or wholly by AI. 54%. By the way, 61.4% of all statistics are made up. Okay, so LinkedIn says that 50 something percent of people are generating content using AI purely. Guess what smart people are doing when they read a big long post on LinkedIn? They're not reading it, they're pasting it into their AI and saying, summarize this for me. So on one side, you've got a human saying, I don't know, write about future hiring practices. And it goes, and then on the other side, someone goes, what is this about? And they go, probably future hiring practices, best as I can tell. So you've got robots talking to robots. And what you least have is the thing I want to talk about, which is signal. You at least have that sense that's like, oh, that really resonated with me. I feel something right now. Oh, wow, okay. Because one of the things the robots can't do especially well is emote. One of the other things that they can't do especially well is bring you alongside in such a way that you feel like you understand the world that the person is interacted with. They cannot commiserate especially well. You can't talk to an AI guy and go, oh, my kid needs a ride only when it's the least convenient ever. And you know what I mean? And what's the robot going to say? Oh, yeah, I feel you. Right. So there's such a gap in what kind of content gets generated by our little robot. So, what do we do instead? What do we do instead is we have to look at a way to stand out. One is, can we create human centric, practical, resilient information? Can we human centric? Does it actually sound like people? Is it practical? Because, oh, I will tell you another thing I've learned about our robot overlords. Our robot overlords love to send out full documents full of platitudes. If I say right now, generate an article for me on some kind of leadership topic, it'll say things like, you have to be clear. And I was like, yeah, wow. Hang on, I got to cancel my afternoon. I've just realized that I have to be clear. And by the way, one of my examples would be that you have to be clear. I think that you're not getting a lot further of taking care of these sorts of things. Um, you can't let the robot do that part, and I'll explain a little later what to do instead. The other thing is people want two things more than anything when they come to consume on LinkedIn. They want two things. They want either information that they find useful, or they want stories that people can use to reinforce their position and view of the world. It's the two things we want. We either want, here's a really cool prompt you can use with AI that'll make your results a lot better. Oh, I better bookmark that. That sounds really good. Or they want, wow, I've been searching for a job right now and it sure isn't that interesting. And I just talked to this guy who is a marketing ops professional who told me every time I push the apply on LinkedIn button, I might as well be just touching my Kermit the Frog guy on my desk because it's going nowhere. Every time you just push that apply, you might as well be sending it into the void because 4,000 people, including 2,000 bots from Russia, also pushed that button. What did I just tell you? I told you a story that connects your experience to what you're feeling, and you get that reinforcement feeling. Tell me you didn't in your belly go, oh man, that explains a lot, or whatever, right? Or if you're already in the know, because I mean a lot of you are professionals in this world, you're like, oh, don't tell me. I was talking to this guy yesterday, and he said to me, um, the minute you allowed for like these automated application systems, you would get very many applications to any job you put up. You could put up dog walker and you'll get 4,000 dog walker applications. I said, I went through that. We tried to put up a leadership position and we got swamped with 4,000 people in the first 60 minutes. And we had to like go sort through 4,000 applications. And I thought, this is something worth noting. That's one of those stories. So there's information, there's stories. That's what people want. So if you're going to bother making content, that's the two lanes you could be in. The other thing I want to tell you that kind of relates to this, and remember this, the story is the basic unit of memory. We will not remember a lot of details, but we will remember enough of the beats of a story to tell it to somebody else. So the story is the basic unit of memory. I'm going to tell you two more things, and then I'm going to check in and make sure that we're doing okay time-wise, because I literally don't remember how much time I was supposed to have. The other one thing that's out there I see all the time is, so look, there's no other way to get around it. Confidence is sexy. Confidence is sexy, but arrogance is not. And similarly, even though confidence is a very important thing to be thinking about, The other thing that humans just cannot appreciate enough is someone being genuinely vulnerable. And by vulnerable, I mean expressing sometimes when you have a stumble or when something doesn't work quite the same way or whatever. But there's a caveat. So confidence is great. Don't be arrogant. Being genuinely vulnerable is great, but do not cross that. Well, they used to call it the hot mess, but that was maybe like 2002. So I don't know what the current version of this is. But like, when Britney Spears kind of shaved her head and lost her mind a little, and that became public news everywhere, that was a challenge because that wasn't necessarily being vulnerable, right? But if you can, whenever someone says, "Boy, that Brogan, he's so authentic," I have no particular problem telling people that I don't know things, or I have no problem telling people when I fail. I'm one of the very few people who has had some measure of success that tells people all the time where I fail. I deal with clinical depression. I tell people about that because I find that executives don't like to explain that they have challenges going on in their universe. So I think that if people are a little more willing to talk about things like clinical depression, and if we kind of desensitize it a little, we're going to have a better life of it. So to me, confidence, authentic, genuine vulnerability, not any other kind. I hate the word authentic, but I have to say it there. Last, and before I just check in with Christy and everything, I have so much more to tell you if you want. Business is about belonging. This is something I've been saying since 2006. Business is about belonging. People want to feel, if you're the person coming into a role, people want to feel like you're going to be someone that augments their world. So you have to think, how do I show that? How do I show that, like, I'm going to make it such that people feel like I'm part of this group? And I think more so than ever before in the history of looking for roles, I think people want to know a little bit more about who you are outside of work, if only to kind of get just a sense that you align with where they are. Like if are your culture is similar. A business that has a whole lot of parents in it is going to be very different than a business that has almost no parents in it. I think that there's a sense that we want to share a little bit of who we are outside the job, a little bit about what we're into when we're not doing it, which is one of a couple of reasons why, if you go and look at my LinkedIn, you're going to be like, is this the same guy? There's just post after a lot of photos that he took when he was out taking a photo walk or something like that. I'll tell you two reasons why I do those photo walk pictures. One is because I'm using photography as meditation. I'm a really bad Buddhist. I used to be Catholic, and now I'm like a bad Buddhist instead. I was bad at Catholicism too. So I'm not great at meditation. My beads are right here. I wiggle them all day long, but the only meditation I seem to get is if I go outdoors with my camera, which is right here. If I go outdoors with my camera and I shoot a couple of shots of things, at that moment, I don't have my phone in my hand. I'm not thinking about work, and I can bring you with me to check out the sunrise you didn't see, or show you a really cool car show, and you can tell me all about your old timey, car that you had that you saw in one of my pictures or something. That's why I do it. So I think this is a good pause moment and just check in, Christy. Make sure this is going the way you wanted
Yeah,
to, Cindy and
it
everybody. How are we
it
doing?
it it, it is. And you have what, 27 more minutes. So feel free. And I do think there's so many people that are in their head about job search. And you're interestingly in job search, which I called you before. You're an accidental executive, I think. And you've been an expert in marketing and positioning and just being human. And then you landed this executive role, and then you found that you really liked it, and now you want to do it again. And so you're in the same situation as most of the people who are on the call, and you deal with real things, like the challenges. I say, I mean, my observation, because we put over 4,000 people through this our boot camp. It's like job search can be demoralizing, no different than, hey, we're in sales, right? Selling, recruiting, and consulting, and it can be demoralizing. And so how do you uh personally deal with that? Because, yes, there's ups, and that you add so much value to people. And then there's the down, saying, wait a minute, I got to put food on the table. And, so share more about that.
Sure.
I, you are so real when you describe, some of your challenges. And I
I'm here for it. So yeah, accidental executive. I could not be any more accidental. So this company that I did the work with, its name is AppFire, and the founder, this guy Randall Ward, he and I worked together in the '90s at this wireless telecom I was in, and we had to do these projects in the middle of the night, like 2 a.m. And I would go over to his desk and bore him to death, asking him all kinds of technical questions. And he was indulging me because it was 2 a.m. and we just had to wait for certain batches of software to run. And years later, he started a company and he said, "Hey, I really want you to be on my advisory board." And he goes, "I could pay you for that. Or if you want, you can consider it an investment and I'll give you some shares in doing this and want to be an advisor." I was like, "Sure." So, hey, Matt Dirks, what do you know? We'll talk about this, Sherry. So I became an advisor. I got some founder shares, which, by the way, if anyone's ever had that experience before where you get some shares, you're like, these are going nowhere. 90 something percent of all shares I've ever received are funny and not worth any money. Two times now, I've had some shares that were worth something. The first was HubSpot, where I was also an advisor. And then the second, that was Appfire. So, flash forward pandemic, I realized one day, holy cow, I'm broke. Like, clinical depression is really expensive because what you do is you just don't go get clients. You just lay in your bed and think, this is good. And so I had run out of my HubSpot money and I thought, I got to really get humping out there. Also, the pandemic started. So I suddenly, all of the people that I would normally have taken loot from were not hiring or paying money right now because the pandemic hit. So everyone's like, oh, what are we going to do? And I started doing a live show, which it would spread to YouTube and LinkedIn, and it was a show about pretty much nothing, kind of like Seinfeld. Like, literal truth, the way the show started was things like, I think I'll make a pot roast, and I had never done that before, so I showed people how I figured it out. But to a point where I made a show called The Backpack Show, where the only goal of the show was we wanted to talk to people who were not commonly asked onto shows or interviews or things like that, and not my marketing idiot friends that I'd known and spoken with for decades. Because there's a very like incestuous, everyone interviews each other, and it's just annoying. So we went out and found people like Sister Anne Flanagan, who was this really nice lady who runs the Sisters of St. Paul convent. And we asked, what's for dinner normally at a convent and stuff like that. We somehow got people like Sir Mix-a-Lot, the fine rapping gentleman, and very many other people. And so it was a very interesting experience. But how I got my job, that I somehow became an executive, literally, this is all that happened. My boss, Randall Ward, was sitting on LinkedIn one day, I'm sure doing something far more important. And I don't know if you know this, but when you go live, LinkedIn will spin a banner across the top that goes, "Hey, Chris Brogan's about to go live." Randall goes, "Oh, Chris Brogan, I like that guy." He contacts me based on that and says, "Hey, I'm trying to really grow my company. I've got like 149 people. I got 10 million in revenue. You want to come in and see if you can help me figure some stuff out?" And I was like, "Okay." And so I came on as like a consultant. And I have this very important rule in consulting: never charge by the hour, only charge by the project. And he said to me, "Look, you are going to hate yourself if you do that, because I am going to scope creep you so bad. It would be so much better if you keep track of the hours. Let's please, please, please just do it by the hours." And I was like, "No." He's like, "No, no, no, please say yes." And I'm like, "Okay." Thank the baby Buddha, the little tiny one. I made so many hours of billing on this project. And then he finally says, after so many months and six figures, "Hey, maybe you could come in and be an employee." I'd run my own company poorly for 19 years. And he said, "Maybe come be an employee." And I was like, "I don't know." And he said, "Benefits." And I'm like, "Oh, that's right. That's right. Healthcare that I don't have to pay several thousand a month for." Okay. So I joined. So he goes, "So you're going to be chief of staff?" And I said, "Well, what's that?" And he goes, "I don't know. Go watch The West Wing." Because there's the fine character Leo in The West Wing and all that. Only I didn't know. So I went and I watched The West Wing, and I came back and I said, "So I'm Rob Lowe?" And he said, "No, you dope. You're Leo." And I went, "Oh." So I had to watch it again. And then I learned how to be a chief of staff from watching The West Wing. And all it really basically meant was, oh, and then I read this good book by this guy, Chris Whipple, called Gatekeepers. And that's all about the chiefs of staff to the president, starting, I think, at Nixon or Ford. And then I was like, oh, this is what they do. They set your executive's agenda. They sort of gatekeep some of this stuff. And they also kind of bring in and bring out talented executives and seniors. So I did this for just about 4 years. And Sherry had mentioned that she knew Matt Dirks. Randall had said when he started this journey 20 plus years ago, he said, hey, come the end of 20 years, I'm done. I don't think any CEO or founder should be around after 20 years. Like, you're just going to wreck the company. And so he'd set this goal. He told me when he brought me in, I'm leaving at like 2025. And I was like, yeah, sure. If you've worked with any founders, you think that's a lie. He's going to say, I'm quitting. And he is absolutely going to stay on a few more years. It's guaranteed. They all do it. He did it. And so come October of this last year, he said, we got to find a successor. So we went through this big, long exercise. It was really fun. It was really exciting. We only asked one person and got one yes, because that's kind of Randall's way too, is like, he doesn't want to do the crazy talent search. He had read very many articles and spoken to several professors who said, the only way this ever works is if you hire another CEO from within, or like friend of the family, so to speak. So Matt was on the board already. We brought him in as a CEO. As I'm transitioning Matt in and bringing this new guy, Matt Dirks, to be the CEO of this company, as my boss is going to leave, Matt says to me, hey, I'll probably keep you around for a year. And I said, oh, that's not how this works. Chiefs of staff usually go with the CEO. Like, I should probably be out. And he's like, no, I'll keep you for a year. About a good month and a half in, he says, nope. You and I aren't like the same. And I was like, yeah, no kidding. Because it's like buying shoes, right? You can't just put on a shoe that someone else left for you. It's got to fit you. I am nothing like this CEO. I was very much the augment of my previous CEO. And so I found rather quickly myself unemployed, which was super fun. Because the thing was, I had run my own business for several years now, from like 2009 to 2020, end of 2019, 20. I'd run my own business, and all that meant was you just go hunting for food all the time. If you've done this, you know how it is. You hump along and try to get the money. I suddenly was an unemployed person, and severance today as we talk, severance is, I think I have three more total checks, one more ish month and some change, and I am $0 in. And so, boy, I'm getting anxious. So I say to myself, because that's what I call myself, I say, I think I'll just go on LinkedIn and start pushing that apply button. And I didn't learn until yesterday that I might as well have been just touching Kermit the Frog. So I have applied to several hundred jobs that they think will be probably not good for me or something. Fine. So I asked this guy yesterday, who is, again, he's a Bill, that is a great out of context sentence. I asked this guy whose job is recruitment ops. So he helps with the software kind of stuff. He helps with getting in and out, hiring and recruiting people. He's not what you guys do. He's the mechanisms inside of a company that, do this kind of work. I said, all right, let's pretend your very wonderful, smart, thrilling wife loses her job tomorrow. What advice do you tell her? And he goes, well, 2/3 of it you're already doing. You're out there writing those newsletters and those articles on LinkedIn. Your face is out there for YouTube. People know who you are. You kind of talk about what you're into. He goes, the only difference is you gotta get just a little more targeted, so that the person who needs to buy what you sell is going to see their need in what you're talking about and go, oh yeah, I should do that. So that's what I definitely think is the way. So this piece of advice is one I have. I think the best possible thing, if you are looking for a full-time role inside an organization, again, you have to go with some kind of recruiting help. You have to go with someone that can help find you the placement, because if you don't have those warm hands that do all the vetting and all that sort of stuff, you are the unwashed masses out there. Stacy had a question. I don't know if we normally just flip them in here, but what's your perspective on the balance between confidence and humility? Both are great traits. Just know when to use them. can humility be seen as a superpower in the interviewing process? Well, first thing I have to say there, Stacey, I have not gotten to another interview yet because evidently I wasn't supposed to be pushing that button. So I don't know, but I'll tell you when I interviewed. So Randall, my CEO, he was like a done deal kind of guy, but this is private equity, and so you got to kind of impress the board, and the board are a bunch of evil sharks. They're lovely people, but they'd sooner step over your corpse if there's money on the other side of it, and so they don't care that I'm a sweetheart, and they don't care that I'm nice. And in that room, and very, very many board meetings subsequently, because I was always there to put together the materials and all that sort of a thing, I would do things like call people that we weren't happy with poopy heads. And I would say things like, I don't think it's good that we hire a person like this if they're going to be a jerk face. Maybe we can. So I'd use like kind of childish language with them, and I will tell you that they hated it. But they would say poopy heads after I'd left the room, and they would call people jerk faces and things. And so I think it's a contrast mechanism. Now, I don't need to sell you my books, but the book that Julian and I wrote after Trust Agents was called The Impact Equation. And the question was, for whatever size you are, one person or a mega company, how do you earn people's attention? And one of the very first part of the impact equation, which subsequently several million people have told us is not an equation, we spelled out the word create, and it was contrast was the C that I'm talking about, Stacey. So in this case, very specific to your question, I think the contrast of me being humble, but also being confident and sort of mixing and matching the two has been very refreshing. The other two are the other rest of the word create is reach. Am I going to forget these? I'll get them later. So, anyways, the book is called The Impact Equation. So the point was that in the process, I found that it's good to be humble. Just like I said earlier about that um, hot mess line, though, it's good to be humble. It's not great to be deadly vulnerable. It's not good to be like, well, I have narcolepsy. I fall asleep every day for 4 hours a day. Like you can skip a few of the details. No one wants to see like every pimple, but what they also don't. I don't think it benefits anyone to look like the absolute look. This is like a cheapy button-down shirt that I think cost me like $20. I would do this. I would wear this into an interview, and I think the reason I would, I'd have nice shoes. The reason I would is I think I would do it to sort of point out the fact that I think if everyone looks the same and if everyone kind of looks like they're all made from the same thing, then how do you make it work? Here's one of a few really good name drops I can give you. I had the pleasure to interview Sir Richard Branson, and ask me sometime in LinkedIn or something how I got that gig. But when I talked to him, one of the things I said is one of many reasons why I consider you kind of my legendary business boss is because of your no tie rule. And he goes, yeah, well, we had this thing where we didn't want everyone looking like they worked at IBM. And so every one of Richard Branson's 400 plus companies, no one has to wear a tie. In fact, it is forbidden. In fact, for very many decades, he walked around with scissors in his back pocket and would snip the ties off people if he saw them in the hallway wearing them. Except his finance group, his banking group, Virgin Banks, who said, could you please stop doing this? We have to wear ties. It's just kind of the uniform to play this particular game. Please leave us alone. And he was like, all right. So that's kind of my really long answer to that question. And as far as how to be an accidental executive, I'll tell you that once I got into the role, there's a movie, it's a really long time ago movie. I think it was called Dave. And the thing I remember the most is this kind of regular guy gets made the president. And one of the things that he does is he brings in his buddy who's like a small business bookkeeper. And the guy says, I don't understand how all this stuff works. This is stupid. Like, why doesn't it just work simpler? There's two things that I felt my whole entire career and continue to push to my benefit or my failure. I think that business should be far simpler in general. I think people who like to complicate business are people who are worried that you think they're dumb. And I think it should be super, super human. I think that if we can develop leadership at all levels, if we can trust people to manage their time appropriately, if we can treat you like you have decency and agency and respect, I think you get a lot further than thinking that people are replaceable robots.
So Kimball has a question, and this is actually true. Recruiters are focusing on their clients' needs, not finding a job for somebody else. And how do you flip that around? Because, I mean, people come to us all the time and want our help, but if we don't have something to work on that matches their skill set, it's just we can't help them. And if we can refer people into companies, but we're not going to get a fee for it. And so, we've got to focus our efforts on things that are revenue generating. And, we add value in so many other ways. We do introduce people to uh companies, contacts that we have at companies that they're looking for. So, to Kimball's question, how would you recommend using that recruiter relationship?
That's a really good question. So I had a great opportunity to talk to a recruiter a couple of months ago, and I made a mistake on the opportunity. I had asked a friend who is an executive. I said, "Hey, can I don't know any recruiters, and I just need to talk to a few, just to even get a sense of what I'm supposed to do. How does this even work?" Because I always feel like in life there's like some secret handshake that we don't know, and if you don't know the secret handshake, how are you going to get in? Like if you don't go like they won't know you like Star Trek or something. I don't know. So this just before I got on the call, I was reading up on the person, which is not the time to do your homework. Do not do your homework 5 minutes before jumping on. And I jumped on realizing that this woman hired CMOs, which I could kind of do because I've done marketing, and CHROs, which I am in no way capable of doing, but believe I'm capable of doing because I'm male. And males think that if they have 11% of the skills, they can do the job. Women, by the way, statistically, 96% capable and still won't apply. Men, 11%. Go figure. So I said to her as the call starts, I said, "You and I do not have any business. Like, you cannot place me because I'm not even the kind of guy you're looking for. But I was hoping to use just a few minutes of your very valuable time to ask you a few generic questions about the process and what works best." And she said, "What works best is, all we're here to do is, find placements for employers. So my employers need CMOs. So I'm out there all the time kind of working it." But she goes, "It's kind of like real estate. Like if you've got a friend who's selling a house, I want you to think of me when you've got a friend who's selling a house." So I think the best way to switch that relationship around, to answer Kimball's question, my best attempt, is if you can help recruiters find more clients, it's going to help you should there be a time where you need that. I have said, and this was in our book, Trust Agents, be at the elbow of every deal. If you can frequently and many times over help people with no expectation of anything in return, what comes out of this experience is that someone goes, I like that person. That person seems to make me feel good. Or, wow, that person really was there when I needed a thing. I have a very long list of randomness that I should not have a reason to be connected with XYZ person. It has always helped me, usually 8 to 10 years after I made that connection. So you have to be willing to play the long game. I told you, frankly, I'm 40-ish days out from having $0 coming in. I really need some helpfulness sooner right now. But the other thing, and this is still important, you ever go to a bar and try to make friends with someone new that you're hoping to date? If you look desperate, you're gonna die. Nobody's like, wow, I can't wait to find a desperate person. So the other thing you have to do is you have to try to be confident and helpful and not look like you are doomed. So there's my point of view.
Julie, you have your hand raised.
I do. Sitting on the other side, sitting as a recruiter on the other side of the table who's not employed, I'll say the majority of recruiters, if they need something, you will hear from them. And if they don't need something, you're probably not going to hear from them. But if there's someone that you do connect with, don't be a pain in the butt. Reach out every so often, send an article, you saw something, keep it light, and hopefully eventually they will remember. Most recruiters do. They look at it as the long game. There are recruiters that all it is to them, quite honestly, is an ass in the seat. They could care less who the candidate is. They're getting paid and that's it. But there are those that do care. Just don't expect, oh my God, they're going to be send a gushing email with all these opportunities. It just doesn't work that way because their tendency is to go back to the people they know who have been in roles for a few years that they can pull out. So this is not a negative. I think it's just an awareness.
And Elena, Elena, I know that you had your uh, real hand raised, which is nice. And you have, I think that you actually have some input for Chris because so Elena is a head of HR and she's been in job search and she has been so incredibly helpful to others. And yet she's still looking, but she's making progress. And so why don't you and Chris have a brief dialogue here?
Yeah, Chris, thank you so much because your information has been absolutely impactful for me because I'm taking a lot of what I'm hearing from you into practice recently. I'm now calling myself a LinkedIn influencer in my job search. I am learning, and I'm learning through the help of other LinkedIn influencers. I'm following very high profile LinkedIn influencers. Some are Gen X, some are Gen Y. They know how to tap and how to hack this market. So I'm following them. I'm also following top YouTube influencers as well. And I put a lot of this into practice. And what you shared and what we just heard as well, I put into practice by creating a LinkedIn post with the help of AI. And I personally refined it with my own voice as well. With scraping the internet for posts for recruiters' jobs within the last 24 hours, for example. And I created and compiled this list. I had AI help me, and then I actually had to tweak it manually and again put it in my voice. But I always, and this is what I learned from the LinkedIn influencers, I always put a call to action in my post. And one, I know that HR and recruiters, we were massively hit as well as all of the tech sector. So just knowing that, I wanted to give back and help recruiters that are still struggling, like I'm still struggling a year and a half later. So posting all of these positions across the globe to specifically target my audience, which were recruiters and recruiters that were laid off. And I use the hashtags for layoffs, use the hashtags for recruiters and talent acquisition, also HR community, but I also put the call to action for them to connect with me and that I'm an open networker. Adding that, just this week alone, I added 850 recruiters. My goal a week ago at our last meeting, Christy, was to add 1,000 new members to my LinkedIn. I'm only 30 away from that number right now. So it has changed my life. And now I have recruiters and CEOs contacting me and reaching out to me. I'm having interviews that I haven't had in a year and a half. Nothing's landed yet, but they're discussions, they're interviews. And as you shared, Chris, even coming in as a founding member, because LinkedIn, I created a custom chat GPT to customize my resume. And I learned this through watching other people that did it. So if anyone needs help, I can help you with that, let me know. But what I did was I asked in creating this custom GPT, what did ChatGPT see about me that was impactful to put out there as a message? And literally the message came back to me almost like a slap on the side of my head. Dummy, I'm a startup expert. I take companies public, yet I wasn't including that in my resume or my LinkedIn profile. So it really highlighted something that I personally wasn't even thinking about or seeing to capitalize on. Once I put and changed that entire prospect out there, now I'm getting a lot of people contacting me. So I've created video reels. Chris, you mentioned putting yourself out there visually. I didn't want to do that before. I kind of like an extrovert introvert, but now I'm putting out photos. When I took the company public, I created a reel for that. I'm going to start creating some actual visual reels. You really have to become visible in this world. And it's LinkedIn applying there. What I'm learning is you aren't getting the responses, but it's your source of information. Use what you see on that posting. Go out to the company's website. Never apply directly on LinkedIn. Apply directly on the company website. We've talked about that, Christy, through our groups for lots of times. I was being stubborn, still going through LinkedIn. Now I'm only going through a company's website. And that has made a world of difference. So yeah, Chris, you're spot on with a lot of it. So thank you.
And Elena, we can't wait until you land, and
Oh,
then
me
you're
too.
going to be a speaker and help people with this, kind of formulaic approach. And so in the last few minutes, anybody have a question for Chris? George.
I just have a question about the last statement, about how you don't go to LinkedIn to apply for the jobs. You actually go to the website. Why is that? I'm just going through the boot camp now, so
And I'll just tell you, George, LinkedIn, they're not paying attention to the LinkedIn applications, really. And
okay.
yeah, so the LinkedIn, and I don't know really why, but they're just not. Hannah Harahar, you have your
Hello
hand
there.
raised.
I have a question and a comment. I heard two contradicting statements about AI. So wanted to hear again the perspective. Initially, we were saying, oh, AI summarizes and AI does this and it doesn't have that context. And then later on, recently, I heard that, oh, AI did a fantastic job. So kind of curious now, what direction are we heading there?
Both. The answer is both. Just like, someone says, man, I don't know, I bought a kitchen knife to start chopping up my vegetables, and I don't know, it's not working. It's how we use the tool. And one of the things I find, so again, as an author, I am very persnickety about how things get written. And so I find that AI tends to write as the lowest case, worst case denominator as a writer. But what I can use it for, this is kind of where my kitchen knife thing, where I can use it for is I can say, I really want to write about this topic. What do you think someone curious about this topic might want to know? Now, it's not going to get them all right, but it is going to spark my thought. So I use the writing tools not to write things for me, but as a companion. I say, hey, give me some ideas here. Or this is my new favorite one because people seem to really love statistics, and most of my stories are pretty, anecdotal at best. And so I'll say, hey, this is what I want to tell people. Can you go find a study that looks like this? By the way, here's why I think statistics are stupid. You can find a study for everything. You can find a study for anything. I can tell you brushing your teeth is a horrible idea, and I can find you the all kinds of really scientific research on why that's true. But I sure wouldn't want to be sharing an Uber with you. So I can tell you that you could use AI, but you have to use it so cautiously. It's kind of like in cooking, right? People were told for some reason from the 80s forward that MSG is terrible. MSG is in all our favorite food. It is delicious, but just globbing it in, that's terrible. So this is how we do it.
So use it with a caution, and human in the loop is important. Okay.
Great question, though. A really good one. Maybe a good one to end on, as far as I could tell. Yeah, we're out of time. And, someone put in the chat that this was inspiring. It's uplifting, and your wit and wisdom and all of that has really, been appreciated. And thank you, Chris, so much for doing it. And I hope you come back but your job search is going to be one for the records. You're going to land in a most just incredible role, and then you have to come back and tell us about the journey of that, because the AppFire role, I mean, that's a Cinderella story. And I mean, really, so thank you so much. And I think from the bottom of my heart and from everyone here, it's just been a pleasure to have you. Thank you.
I'm very grateful. Thanks, Christy, for sharing the stage. Thanks for all you smart people for showing up and giving me some time and pretending I might have something useful to say.
You
Come find me.
do.
It's always good to see you. So thanks so much for being part of it. And come find me out
And
there on the web. Happy to
yeah,
chat.
and sign up for his what is that Substack? Sign up for his Substack. He writes great articles. I get his Sunday newsletters every single week, and it's something that I look forward to every Sunday morning. And it's there's so much wit and wisdom and humanness in what Chris puts out. And so thank you so much, Chris. And so for all of you out there, be encouraged that some great things are going to happen. Be expectant, not expecting, but expect great things to happen. And Elena, we're going to continue watching your journey too. So, all right, everyone. Thank you. Stay safe, stay cool, and stay inspired. And bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend, everyone.